are names that echo through history. Names that make men whisper in fear, even centuries after the flesh has rotted from bone. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, the devil incarnate, as they called him. A monster conjured from the darkest depths of the sea itself. But monsters aren't born. They're made. Forged in the crucible of desperation, violence, and a world tearing itself apart for gold and glory. This is not a story about a pirate. This is a story about how fear becomes legend, how a man becomes a myth, and how propaganda can transform a human being into something far more terrifying than any truth. Bristol, England, late 1680s, the heart of the Atlantic trade empire, where fortunes are built on human cargo and exotic goods from distant shores. Somewhere in this city of contrasts, a boy is born. His name, we believe, is Edward Teach. Or was it Thatch? Drummond? Thatch? Even his name is a mystery, lost to time and deliberate obscurity. The truth is, we don't know who Edward Teach was before he became Blackbeard. No definitive birth record. No family history that we can confirm. It's as if he deliberately erased his past, or perhaps his past was so unremarkable that history simply didn't bother to record it. What we do know is this. England in the 1680s and 90s was a powder keg. The poor were crushed under the weight of aristocratic excess. Boys like Edward, if that was indeed his name, had three choices: starve in the streets, work themselves to death in factories, or go to sea. The sea promised something intoxicating, freedom. And for those desperate enough or bold enough, it promised something more: revenge against a world that had given them nothing. The Merchant Marine was Edward Teach's university, and its curriculum was brutality. 15-hour days, rotten food, disease, and violence as both punishment and learning. People romanticized the age of sail, but life aboard these ships was hell. You learned to obey, or you were beaten. You learned to fight, or you died. The sea didn't care about your dreams or your morals. It cared about strength. Edward Teach's education took him across the Atlantic, the same routes that carried enslaved Africans, sugar, tobacco, and rum. He saw the machinery of empire up close, the wealth built on suffering, the violence that kept the system running. Did he feel guilt, disgust, or did he simply learn the lesson that the powerful take what they want, and morality is a luxury only the rich can afford? Then came war. Queen Anne's War, as they called it, known in Europe as the War of Spanish Succession. From 1701 to 1714, European powers turned the Atlantic into a battleground, and suddenly there was profit in violence. Edward Teach became a privateer, a legalized pirate, sanctioned by the British Crown to attack enemy vessels. He learned the craft of maritime warfare, how to read the wind, how to outmaneuver a heavier ship, how to strike terror into an enemy's heart. But more importantly, he learned that there is no difference between a pirate and a privateer except a piece of paper signed by men in distant palaces. Both kill and both steal. The only difference is who gives you permission. And in 1714, when the war ended and those licenses were revoked, Edward Teach made a choice that would echo through history. He decided he no longer needed anyone's permission. Nassau, 1715. The British have abandoned this Caribbean outpost, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into this void fled hundreds of former privateers, all trained killers, all suddenly unemployed. This is the birth of the golden age of piracy, though golden depends entirely on where you're standing. For merchants and colonial powers, it's a nightmare. For desperate men with nothing to lose, it's utopia. Nassau became something remarkable, a kind of anarchist experiment. Pirates elected their captains. They shared treasure relatively equally. Men who had been slaves could become free. It was democracy with daggers. Edward Teach arrives in Nassau sometime around 1716. He's in his mid-30s, late for a pirate, but perfect for someone who has learned patience. He doesn't announce himself. He watches. He learns. He joins the crew of Benjamin Hornigold, one of Nassau's most successful pirates. Hornigold sees something in him: intelligence, ruthlessness, but also restraint. The ability to think 3 moves ahead. For 2 years, Teach learns the trade from a master. He studies Hornigold's tactics. He builds relationships with the crew. And he begins to understand something crucial. In this world, reputation is more valuable than gold. Every performer understands the power of costume. Every general knows that fear can win battles before a single shot is fired. And Edward Teach, brilliant and calculating, was about to create the most terrifying character in maritime history. He grew his beard long and black, braiding it into tails decorated with ribbons. Before battle, he would light slow-burning fuses and tuck them under his hat, wreathing his face in sulphurous smoke. He armed himself to the teeth, 6 pistols across his chest, cutlasses at his waist. He wasn't just a pirate anymore. He was Blackbeard, a devil incarnate, a nightmare given form. And the genius of it was this: most of it was theater. Blackbeard understood psychological warfare before the term existed. He created a persona so terrifying that ships would surrender without firing a shot. Less violence, less risk, maximum profit. It was brilliant. In late 1717, Hornigold gives Teach his own command, a captured French slave ship called Le Concorde. Teach renames her Queen Anne's Revenge. It's an act of dark irony, claiming loyalty to a queen who would hang him as a traitor. He transforms the ship into a floating fortress with 40 guns and a crew of over 300. She's one of the most powerful vessels in the Caribbean, and everyone knows who commands her. His flag tells the story: time is running out, and death is coming. Surrender or face the consequences. Between 1717 and 1718, Blackbeard orchestrates a campaign of terror unlike anything the Atlantic has seen. But here's what's remarkable. For all his fearsome reputation, he rarely kills anyone. Blackbeard's strategy was economically rational. Dead men can't spread stories. If you kill everyone, the next ship will fight to the death. But if you terrify them into surrender and then treat them relatively well, they spread your reputation. The next crew is even more likely to surrender. It's force multiplication through propaganda. He would question captains about which merchants paid well, which routes were richest, which governors were corrupt. He was building an intelligence network, turning piracy into a science. Historians estimate Blackbeard captured over 40 ships in just 18 months. His take? Converted to today's value, his profits would equal millions. But he was accumulating something far more dangerous: power. May 1718. Charleston, South Carolina, one of Britain's most prosperous colonial cities. Wealthy, confident, and secure in the protection of the British Empire. They're about to learn that empires are only as strong as the men willing to enforce their rules. On May 22nd, Blackbeard appears off Charleston Harbor with his fleet, Queen Anne's Revenge, and 3 smaller vessels. 40 guns. 400 men. He doesn't attack. He doesn't raid. He does something far more insulting. He blockades the entire city. For 6 days, Blackbeard holds Charleston hostage. Ships trying to leave are captured. Ships trying to enter are seized. 9 vessels fall into his hands, along with prominent citizens, including Samuel Wragg, a member of the Colonial legislature. This wasn't just piracy. This was a direct challenge to British dominion. Blackbeard was essentially saying, "Your empire means nothing out here. I control these waters. And to prove it, I'll take your city's leading citizen, and you can't stop me." But Blackbeard doesn't demand gold. He doesn't demand silver. He demands something that reveals the complex reality of pirate life, something that humanizes him even as it shows his audacity. He demands a chest of medicine. His crew is ravaged by disease, syphilis, the scourge of sailors. He needs mercury and other treatments, and he needs them urgently, enough to risk it all. Blackbeard sends a message to Governor Robert Johnson. Deliver the medicine within 48 hours, or every prisoner dies, and Charleston burns. The governor has no choice. He has no warships. He has no navy. He has nothing but his pride, and pride doesn't stop pirates. Charleston surrenders. The medicine is delivered. The prisoners are released, stripped of their valuables, but alive. And Blackbeard sails away, leaving the city's dignity in ruins. But the Charleston blockade accomplished something beyond the immediate ransom. It announced to every power in the Atlantic that a new force had emerged, one that couldn't be ignored. Letters flood London and royal governors throughout the colonies. The message is clear. Something must be done about Blackbeard. The propaganda machine Blackbeard created now works against him. He's become too famous, too threatening, too successful. The empire is preparing its response. And Blackbeard, for all his genius, is about to make a fatal mistake. June 1718, Bath, North Carolina. After the Charleston blockade, Blackbeard does something unexpected, something that reveals the political complexity beneath the pirate's mask. He accepts a pardon. King George I has issued a general amnesty. Any pirate who surrenders before a deadline will be forgiven. It's a calculated gamble by the crown. Offer mercy to divide the pirate brotherhood, to encourage defection. The pardon scheme was sophisticated. It recognized that you can't just hang all the pirates. There are too many, and hunting them is expensive. Better to offer an exit ramp and hope they turn on each other. Governor Charles Eden grants Blackbeard his pardon. Officially, Edward Teach is now a law-abiding citizen of North Carolina. He even marries his 14th wife, if legends are to be believed. He settles into a house. He becomes respectable. But was it real? Or was Blackbeard playing a deeper game? Historical evidence suggests something darker. Governor Eden may have been complicit in Blackbeard's continued piracy. North Carolina was poor. Royal governors were corrupt. And Blackbeard had wealth. Within months of his pardon, Blackbeard is back at sea. He captures ships. He sells stolen goods. And mysteriously, Vice Admiralty courts in North Carolina rule in his favor time and time again, declaring captured vessels derelict and therefore legal salvage. This was frontier corruption at its finest. Eden gets a cut. Blackbeard gets protection. The merchants get robbed, but they're far away in Virginia and South Carolina, so who cares? It's a partnership that benefits everyone except the victims. Blackbeard even shares cargo with Eden, 60 hogsheads of sugar mysteriously appearing in the governor's warehouse. The official explanation? A gift. But not everyone is willing to play along. Virginia's Governor Alexander Spotswood watches this arrangement with growing fury. Virginia merchants are losing ships. Spotswood's political rivals are mocking his inability to control his own waters. This is no longer just about piracy. It's about colonial politics, territorial disputes, and personal pride. Spotswood doesn't just want to stop Blackbeard. He wants to humiliate Eden and prove Virginia's superiority over North Carolina. And he's willing to bend the law to do it. Ocracoke Inlet, a shallow, treacherous passage of water on the Carolina coast. Blackbeard has made it his base, deliberately choosing a location where large warships can't follow. Here, he's safe. Or so he believes. By November 1718, Blackbeard has scaled down. Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground months earlier, possibly deliberately, allowing him to cheat his crew out of their shares and escape with the treasure. Now he commands only the Adventure, with a skeleton crew of about 25 men. Spotswood has spies everywhere. He knows where Blackbeard is. He knows the pirate is vulnerable, and he knows that if he acts quickly and quietly, he can strike before Eden or anyone else can intervene. Spotswood assembles a task force in secret. He commissions Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy, giving him 2 sloops and 55 men. He offers a massive bounty, 100 pounds for Blackbeard, smaller amounts for the crew. And then he does something legally questionable. He sends Maynard into North Carolina waters without permission from Eden or North Carolina authorities. It's an invasion disguised as law enforcement. November 21st, 1718. Maynard's forces sail south toward Ocracoke. They travel in silence. No lights, no signals. They're not coming to arrest Blackbeard. They're coming to kill him. The year is 1718. On November 22nd, Blackbeard and his men are aboard the Adventure, anchored in shallow water. They've been drinking through the night, many of them still visibly intoxicated. Then someone spots them. 2 Royal Navy sloops, cutting through the mist. Maynard has found him. Blackbeard is shouting at the crew, "All hands, man the guns, cut the anchor. We're not caught yet." For a moment, it looks like Blackbeard might escape. The Adventure is faster, and she can navigate shallow water where Maynard's heavier sloops can't follow. But fate intervenes. The Adventure grounds on a sandbar. They're stuck, and Maynard is closing in. Blackbeard makes a decision. If he's going down on his terms. He raises a bottle of rum, drinks deeply, and shouts across the water to Maynard, "Damn you for villains! Who are you? And from whence came you?" Maynard shouts back, "You may see by our colors we are no pirates." Blackbeard responds, "Come aboard then, and I'll show you who I am." And then, hell breaks loose. Blackbeard's first broadside is devastating. Jane takes heavy damage. Men scream and die. Maynard's second sloop, Ranger, runs aground trying to maneuver. For a moment, it seems Blackbeard might actually win. But Maynard is clever. He orders most of his surviving crew to go below deck, making it appear the sloop is barely manned. Blackbeard takes the bait. He finally works the Adventure free and comes alongside Jane to board her and finish the fight. With his characteristic fearlessness, or perhaps his characteristic arrogance, Blackbeard leads the boarding party himself. What happens next is burned into maritime legend. Blackbeard and Maynard meet face to face. According to Maynard's own account, they fire pistols at each other. Both miss. Blackbeard draws his cutlass. Maynard draws his sword. The blades clash. Blackbeard swings his cutlass with such force that he breaks Maynard's sword at the hilt. He raises his blade for the killing blow, and then Maynard's hidden crew explodes from below deck. Suddenly, Blackbeard isn't fighting one man. He's fighting 15. But even then, he doesn't surrender. He doesn't beg. He fights like a demon. Finally, a British sailor comes at him from behind and cuts his throat. Even then, Blackbeard tries to cock a pistol for one last shot. He kept fighting with that much damage. Whatever else you say about him, the man was physically extraordinary. When they examined Blackbeard's body, they counted 25 wounds, 5 pistol shots, and 20 cutlass slashes. Blackbeard, the terror of the Atlantic, the man who blockaded Charleston, who made empires tremble, dies on a blood-soaked deck, still refusing to yield. Maynard orders Blackbeard's head cut off and hung from the bowsprit as proof. A trophy, a warning. News of Blackbeard's death spreads like wildfire. In London, in colonial capitals, in taverns and churches, people celebrate. The monster is dead. The nightmare is over. 13 of Blackbeard's crew are tried and hanged in Virginia. Their bodies are left to rot in cages as warnings to other would-be pirates. The golden age of piracy is ending, crushed by imperial might. Spotswood receives accolades. He's a hero. The pirate scourge is defeated. Eden is humiliated, his corruption exposed. Virginia's supremacy is proven. But death does something interesting to men like Blackbeard. It transforms them from flesh to myth. And myths are harder to kill than men. Within years, Blackbeard is already more legend than history. The stories grow. The terror amplifies. For 3 centuries, treasure hunters have obsessed over one question. Where is Blackbeard's treasure? The legend says he buried massive hoards along the Carolina coast. That he told his crew, "Only I and the devil know where it lies, and the longer liver shall have all." But here's the truth that disappoints so many. There probably isn't any treasure. Pirates didn't bury treasure. That's a modern myth. They spent it, fast, on rum, on women, on supplies. Why bury wealth you might never live to recover? These men knew they probably wouldn't survive to old age. The records suggest Blackbeard spent lavishly. He supported a large crew. He bribed officials. He lived in the moment because he understood, perhaps better than anyone, that he had no future. In 1996, researchers believe they found Queen Anne's Revenge off the North Carolina coast. The wreck has yielded cannons, medical equipment, navigation tools, but no treasure hoard, because there likely never was one to begin with. Yet people still search, still believe, because the idea of Blackbeard's treasure is more valuable than any chest of gold. It represents possibility, mystery, the romance of piracy. So who was Edward Teach? Was he a monster? By our standards, certainly. He terrorized people. He stole. He may have participated in the slave trade before turning pirate. He was violent when he needed to be. But he was also intelligent, strategic, a master of psychology and propaganda. He understood that violence avoided is more valuable than violence committed. He knew how to read people, situations, the political currents of his age. We want our villains simple, pure evil. But Blackbeard was a product of his time. A time when empires built wealth on slavery, when violence was the language of power, when the difference between a pirate and an admiral was just which king you served. Perhaps the most unsettling truth about Blackbeard is how little he differed from the legitimate powers of his age. He just did it without permission, without the flag, without the pretty words about civilization and progress. The empires that condemned him built their wealth on the same violence, the same theft, the same terrorism. They just called it something else. Trade, colonization, and civilization. Edward Teach, whoever he really was, looked at this world and made a choice. He could be the victim or the victimizer, the robbed or the robber, the slave to empire or the enemy of it. For 2 brief years, he chose freedom, violent, chaotic, doomed freedom. And in choosing it, he became immortal. Piracy didn't die with Blackbeard. Wherever there is wealth and weak enforcement, desperate men will take what they can. But Blackbeard's real legacy isn't about piracy. It's about the power of fear, the power of reputation, the power of a well-crafted myth. He understood what every dictator, every revolutionary, every person seeking power understands. Control the story, and you control reality. Make people fear you enough, and you won't have to fight. Those slow-burning fuses wreathing his face in smoke weren't just theater. They were a philosophy. Reality is what people believe it to be. And 300 years later, we still believe in Blackbeard. Not the man. We never really knew him. But the myth, the monster, the devil pirate who blockaded Charleston and died fighting 15 men. Edward Teach died on November 22, 1718. He lived violently, died violently, and left almost nothing behind except stories. But those stories won't die, because we need them. We need villains and heroes, monsters and rebels. We need to believe that somewhere, someone is living free of all the rules that bind us. Maynard thought he killed Blackbeard when he cut off his head. Governor Spotswood thought he ended the threat when he hanged the crew. The British Empire thought it won when the golden age of piracy ended. They were all wrong. You can't kill a legend. You can't hang a myth. You can't defeat a story by defeating a man. Edward Teach is still out there. He just waits for the next desperate man to pick up his flag